It was 7:32 in the morning, Tuesday. The rain outside my 14th floor window streaked the glass, blurring the Kiev skyline into a watercolour of grey and steel. Inside, the only sounds were the gentle snip of my shears and the quiet hum of the servers one floor below. My office smelled of lapsang souchong tea, old books, and the damp, earthy scent of my Kishu Shimpaku bonsai tree. For 15 years, this corner of the building had been my sanctuary, my command centre. The tiny branch in my grasp was no thicker than a wire. I made the cut. A perfect, clean angle. Patience, control, long-term strategy. Everything you need to know about cybersecurity, this little tree could teach you. My desk phone buzzed, a soft, unobtrusive sound. It was Liam, a junior engineer, his voice tight with panic. "Eleanor, we have a problem, a big one. Tier 3 support flagged a brute force attempt on the executive payroll server. They think it is a state-level actor." I did not even look up from my tree. It is not. It is a diversion. Check the access logs for the third-party HVAC vendor portal. Cross-reference timestamps with outbound DNS requests from Subnet 4. You will find a single packet, less than a kilobyte, sent to an address in Estonia at precisely 3:04 a.m. Silence on the other end. I could picture him, young, brilliant, but still seeing the charging bull, not to the matador's cape. But the brute force attack is hammering us right now. "The attack is noise," I said, snipping another tiny branch. "Loud, obvious, designed to make you look over there while the real threat slips in through a door you forgot existed. They are not trying to break the lock. They are already inside, using a key someone gave them." I heard the frantic clatter of his keyboard. A pause, a sharp intake of breath. "My God, you are right. It is here. One packet. How did you know?" I placed the shears down on their velvet cloth. My gaze drifted to the framed photograph on my desk. It showed a younger me standing next to my mentor, David. He had given me my first job, my first real server to command, and the vintage Omega Speedmaster on my wrist. Its mechanical movement was a tiny, perfect engine of precision, a reminder of the elegance of a well-designed system. "Because I built the house," I told Liam, "I know where all the secret passages are." I had built Project Chimera from the ground up. It was not just a security system, it was a corporate nervous system, an elegant interwoven lattice of protocols and failsafes that protected every byte of data the company owned. On my monitor, it looked less like code and more like a work of art, a constellation of nodes and pathways, beautiful in its complexity. He had no idea what he was really trying to steal. The system was my life's work, my professional soul. Then Sterling Pembroke arrived. He walked into the office that first day like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. His father was a senior partner at the venture capital firm that held a majority stake. Sterling was 29 years old, with aggressively styled hair, a jawline clenched with unearned confidence, and a Brioni suit that fit him so poorly it must have been an act of deliberate sartorial violence. He was the new Chief Technology Officer. My new boss. He strutted over to my desk, ignoring the bonsai, ignoring the network diagrams. He picked up my latest 17-page risk analysis report, a detailed breakdown of potential vulnerabilities in our mobile device management protocol. He fanned his face with it. "Just boil this down to a tweet for me, Elena," he said, his voice dripping with the casual condescension of the perpetually promoted. "I am a big picture guy." I watched him, my expression unreadable. I noted the scuff marks on his $1,000 shoes, the kind a man gets from kicking his feet up on his desk. I noted the way his eyes darted around, never truly seeing anything, just assessing its value relative to him. In the weeks that followed, the small humiliations began to accumulate, like grains of sand forming a pearl of pure rage. He started calling me the legacy security lead in meetings, a polite way of calling me a dinosaur. He would interrupt my technical briefings to translate for the non-technical executives, replacing my precise analysis with a word salad of buzzwords he had learned from a podcast. "What Eleanor is trying to say," he would boom, "is that we need to leverage our security framework's blockchain synergy to create a paradigm shift in our threat vectoring." He had no idea what any of those words meant. The executives, equally clueless, would nod in vigorous agreement. The breaking point came in the third-floor conference room. It was a cold, grey Wednesday. I was presenting my plan for the annual network stress test, a full-scale simulated attack designed to find our weaknesses before our enemies did. Sterling cut me off mid-sentence. "No," he said, holding up a hand. "We are not doing this." I paused. "Sterling, this test is critical. It is how we validate our defences." He smiled, a wide, empty, predatory grin. "It is paranoid overkill, Elena. It is fear-mongering. I have already ordered the most expensive firewall on the market. It is the Ferrari of firewalls. Cybersecurity is simple. The best defence is a good offence." The board members, a collection of men in identical grey suits, murmured their approval. They did not understand the technology, but they understood the language of expensive purchases. Sterling had given them a simple answer to a complex problem, and they loved him for it. I was dismissed. My expertise, my 15 years of experience, rendered irrelevant by a boy with a trust fund and a thesaurus. That was the moment I knew he had to be destroyed. The all-hands meeting was held in the grand atrium, a cavernous space of glass and steel. 200 employees sat in neat rows of chairs, their faces upturned, expectant. Sterling stood on a small stage, backlit by a giant projection of the company logo. He paced back and forth, radiating a smug energy that was almost physically repulsive. He talked for 10 minutes about a bold new direction. He used the word synergy 12 times. He spoke of disruption and streamlining. Then he put my network diagram on the screen behind him. He put it up there for everyone to see. "For too long," he announced, his voice echoing slightly in the large space, "we have been operating inside a fortress. Project Chimera, our current system, is a relic, a fortress with a moat in the age of drone warfare." He was using my own words, phrases I had used in private briefings to describe the system's core philosophy. He was twisting them into insults. "This company needs to be agile. We cannot be anchored to the past by paranoid overkill." He looked directly at me then, a flicker of cruel triumph in his eyes. "Which is why today is Eleanor Ashford's last day. We need security professionals, not security theatre. We wish her well in her retirement." A collective gasp went through the room. 2 security guards, men I had shared coffee with for years, moved awkwardly toward me. They would not meet my eyes. My team stared at me, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. I felt nothing. The rage had burned away, leaving behind something cold and clear and hard. I stood up slowly. I did not look at Sterling. I did not look at the shocked faces of my colleagues. I walked to my office, the 2 guards trailing behind me like apologetic shadows. My movements were calm, deliberate. I unplugged the small humidifier for my bonsai. I carefully placed the ancient tree into its custom-carrying box. I picked up my worn, leather-bound copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I did not pack anything else. My work, my files, my legacy, they could have it. It was all worthless now anyway. As I walked out of the office for the last time, my bonsai in my arms, I felt 200 pairs of eyes on me. I did not give them a show. No tears, no angry words, just a quiet, dignified exit. This silent, controlled act was my first moment of defiance. It was the beginning of his end. My apartment is minimalist, a sanctuary of clean lines and quiet order. White walls, dark wood floors, a single, perfectly placed Eames chair. It overlooks the Dnipro River, and that evening, the city lights glittered on the dark water like scattered diamonds. There was no panic. There was only the plan. I went through my ritual. I boiled the water to precisely 95 degrees Celsius. I measured out a spoonful of smoky lapsang souchong leaves, their scent filling my small kitchen. I brewed the tea in my favourite porcelain cup, feeling its warmth seep into my hands. Then, I sat at my desk and opened my personal laptop. I did not need to hack into the company. I did not need to break a single law. I just needed to do nothing. I opened a personal file, a simple text document I had created a decade ago. It contained the secret of Project Chimera, its final, ultimate defense. What he did not understand was that Chimera was not just a collection of software. It was a reflection of my philosophy. It trusted no one. The system's core functions, emergency rollbacks, data purges, root-level access, were protected by a failsafe I called Admin 0. To access it, you needed a daily cryptographic key, a key that was never stored anywhere, a key that had to be generated by hand every 24 hours. I had built this system with one hidden feature: me. The algorithm to generate the key was my secret. It was based on two variables that no one could ever guess or replicate. The first was the closing stock price of a defunct tech company from the 1990s, the first place I ever worked. It was a sentimental, meaningless number to anyone but me. The second was the word count of a randomly selected page from my personal copy of Meditations. The copy I had just carried out of my office. Every morning for 15 years, I had performed this small ritual. I would check the historical stock price, open my book to a random page, count the words, and combine the two numbers to generate the key. It was a digital lock whose combination was a memory and a line of philosophy. It was, by design, impossible for anyone else to replicate. My laptop screen showed the secure portal. The prompt blinked patiently. Enter admin 0 key for September 6, 2025. I looked at the blinking cursor. My revenge was not an act of aggression, but one of perfect surgical omission. I took a slow sip of my tea. The smoky flavour was rich, complex. With a quiet sense of intimate satisfaction, I deliberately closed the laptop's lid. Back at the company, I knew what was happening. Sterling's new Tiger team, a collection of overpaid consultants and terrified junior developers, was beginning their upgrade. They were clumsy children with power tools, ripping out the elegant, interwoven threads of Chimera's code and replacing them with expensive, off-the-shelf software they barely understood. I could picture the system logs, flashing warnings that no one was reading. Integrity compromised. Unauthorized core change attempt. The system I had built was alive. It was sentient in its own way. It was trying to defend itself. But the new operators were too arrogant, too ignorant to listen. The countdown to collapse had begun. They were creating the very vulnerabilities I had spent my life preventing, and I was going to let them. 72 hours later, it happened. It was a Friday afternoon. I was repotting an orchid when my personal phone, the one with the number only a few people had, began to ring. I saw Sterling's name on the screen. I smiled. For the first time in 3 days. I ignored the call. I knew what the panic must feel like inside that building. I had run the simulations 100 times. A junior engineer would notice an anomaly. A few files in accounting would be inaccessible. Then a whole directory. Then a server. Data being encrypted at an impossible rate. Ransomware. Sterling, sweating through his expensive shirt, would be shouting orders, his voice high and thin. He would tell them to activate the emergency protocols, to sever external connections, and roll back to the secure backups I had meticulously maintained. And that is when they would hit the wall that I had built. The system core, the heart of Project Chimera, would not respond. To perform an action that drastic, an action that could wipe out terabytes of data if done incorrectly, required admin zero authorization. The engineers would try every override they knew. They would search the documentation, finding no mention of it. And with each failed attempt, the system would interpret their frantic efforts as a high-level internal breach. It was working exactly as I had designed it to. On their screens, a single, stark message would appear in a monospaced font on a black background. Authentication failed. Admin, zero key required. System lockdown initiated. Chimera was now a cage. The hackers were running rampant on one side, and the incompetent management was locked out on the other. I had built the world's most sophisticated digital prison, and Sterling Pembroke had just locked himself inside it. I watched his world collapse in real time from the comfort of my own home. The look on his face when he realised his fatal error must have been magnificent. My phone rang again, and again. On the fourth try, I let it ring 3 times before I answered, my voice perfectly level. Eleanor Ashford. He was not shouting. He was screaming, a frantic, babbling torrent of words about codes and access and lawsuits. The system is locked. We are locked out. I need your damn codes now. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of tea. I held the warm porcelain, a small anchor of calm in his storm. Sterling, which system are you referring to? The paranoid Overkill or the security theatre? You will have to be more specific. My tone was not gloating. It was clinical. It was the voice of a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. He stammered, his arrogance completely stripped away, leaving only the terrified child underneath. The system you called security theatre is working perfectly, Sterling, I continued, my voice cold and precise. Cold, and it is protecting the company's assets from all threats, including incompetent management, attempting unauthorized access during a crisis. I took a sip of tea. Do you remember that 17-page memo you used as a fan? The one you told me to boil down to a tweet? Page 12, section 4, paragraph 3. It outlined this exact ransomware scenario and the lockdown protocol that would follow. Your exact words, I believe, were that it was fear-mongering. I let that hang in the air. I could hear his ragged breathing. I could hear the background noise of panicked shouting in what used to be my office. I cannot give you the codes, Sterling, I said. They no longer exist. They are ephemeral, generated daily from a set of variables you could never hope to guess. And as you so publicly pointed out, I no longer work for you. Any attempt by me to access the system now would be a federal crime. I paused, timing it perfectly. However, I added, the word dripping with possibility, as an independent contractor, I could be hired to resolve the situation. My emergency consultation fee is $5 million, wired in advance. I will also require a contract for a permanent chief security advisor role, reporting directly to the board, not to the CTO. You can find my lawyer's number in my employee exit file. I am sure it is around somewhere. I hung up. I did not slam the phone down. I pressed the end call button with a quiet, final click. I left him in the roaring silence of his own failure. The wire transfer confirmation arrived in my email inbox 7 minutes later. The contract arrived 15 minutes after that. When I walked back into the office an hour later, it was to a scene of utter chaos. People were running, shouting, but as I walked through the atrium, A wave of silence spread before me. My old team, my engineers, stopped what they were doing and just stared. They parted for me like I was Moses and they were the Red Sea. I saw the looks on their faces. Not pity, not sympathy. Awe. I walked past Sterling. He was standing by the reception desk, pale, defeated, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked like a ghost at his own funeral. I did not look at him. To acknowledge him would be to give him a shred of relevance he no longer possessed. He was nothing. A footnote in my story. I sat down at the main command terminal. The black screen with its white text greeted me like an old friend. My fingers flew across the keyboard. It took less than an hour. I manually generated a new admin 0 key. I unlocked the system core. I isolated and purged the ransomware. I restored the data from the now accessible secure backups. I rebuilt the walls he had torn down. My brilliance, the brilliance he had dismissed and humiliated, was on full, undeniable display. 1 week later, I am sitting in my new office. It is a corner office, the one that used to be his. It is twice the size of my old one, with a floor-to-ceiling window that offers a panoramic view of the city. The September sun is streaming in, bright and clear. On the massive mahogany desk, my Kishu Shimpaku bonsai sits in the center, thriving in the sunlight. Next to it is a printed news article from a major tech journal. The headline reads, "Sterling Pembroke, terminated for gross negligence, faces personal liability suits in massive data breach." I have not gloated. I have not said, "I told you so." I have not had to. The system did the talking for me. I have a new title, a new salary, and a direct line to a terrified and deeply respectful board of directors. I pick up my teacup. I look out at the city sprawling below me. It is not smugness, I feel. It is not even happiness. It is a deep, quiet, and profound satisfaction. The clean, simple pleasure of a complex problem solved. The quiet victory of a plan perfectly executed. I am in my rightful place. My value has been recognized. The new order has begun.